As Africa, the rest of the world and community start to move out of the COVID pandemic, the topic comes back on the agenda quite quickly around Africa's growth ambition. The question which soon follows after that is, how does Africa finance this growth ambition? Today I'd like to spend a few minutes and talk about 5 key factors which I think will stimulate the growth ambition across the continent. The first is the strength and the structure of local and regional banks. The second is the rapid evolution of fintech in Africa and how that can support your small to medium enterprises. The third is the positive signs coming out of government around change and their willingness to assist driving growth. The fourth is international investors and their insatiable demand for emerging market credit risk. And fifth is the rapid change in the power mix across the continent driven by the demand for sustainable finance. When I talk about strong regional and local banks, what exactly do I mean? The first is they are well capitalized and they've weathered the storms without having to have any distressed rights issues, and they're built for growth. They all have strong ambitions to support small to medium enterprises as well as large corporates. The other aspect which is permeating all the banks is their strong drive to harness the data which they have and allow them to make better credit decisions. When I put this all together, I believe regional banks are key to driving growth, and they're well capitalized to do so. As banks grow and build their balance sheets, a key aspect is how do they manage the risk and the distribution of that risk. And this is where international investors come to play. We've seen strong demand, not only at a sovereign level, but at a corporate level for fixed income paper coming out of Africa. Despite deterioration in sovereign risk profiles, you still see international investors understanding the risks associated with Africa and still have interest in investing in the credit. The bond market is a very important funder of growth in Africa, but it's not just the international bond market, it's also the domestic bond market. And we've been pleasantly surprised by the amount of activity which we've seen coming out of places like Nigeria, South Africa, and Kenya during the course of this year. And I've always been of the view that Africa needs to fund African growth, so the development of these domestic bond markets is very important. The other group of international investors which I'm referring to is the development finance institutions, or the DFIs. And they play a critical role, and we've seen them not just in infrastructure, but how do they support regional banks as well as how do they support SMEs, which I think is very promising. And that's complemented by strong regional DFIs in the likes of TDB and AfriExim that have increased their support in the domestic economies during the last year. And I believe they're well placed to actually continue to do that. I mentioned fintechs earlier, and the reason why I did it is not because they can create efficiency in the payments markets or alternative credits. I think what really drives it is the role they can play in the development and growth of small to medium-sized companies. As we all know, this is the backbone of employment across the continent. When they start to harness the data which they have and open and use that data in analyzing the credit, they start to be able to provide funding solutions to SMEs which banks traditionally haven't played in. So I'm very confident that fintechs and the evolution of fintechs in the continent will play a leading role in funding Africa's growth. The next topic, which I think will be hotly debated over the next few years, is sustainable finance and the transition of the power sector across Africa. And I mentioned this as one of the key drivers for growth because it is a huge opportunity. I think we are fully aware of the transition that is needed away from fossil fuels to more green energy when it comes to the production of power. Africa is in a unique position because many of the traditional formats of power generation in the rest of the world are not present in Africa. So as technology enhances rapidly in renewable energy, there is an opportunity to embrace it. What of course we mustn't forget is the role fossil fuels plays actually in the backbone of many economies, whether it's oil and gas or coal. So there is always going to be a risk that the transition happens too quickly. So this concept of just transition across the continent is very important. However, I do believe there is a lot of capital that's currently been made available to effectively grow sustainability or sustainable finance in Africa linked to renewable energy projects. And this is something which the different economies and regions in Africa must embrace, and it will really help drive growth and drive employment. As we come out of the COVID crisis, we've all seen that governments are strained from a fiscus perspective. You've seen rating agencies downgrade a number of African sovereigns. However, what encourages me is actually what governments are doing around legislation. The fact that governments are embracing fintech, embracing alternative payment platforms, the growth of other forms of lending activity is really great because it creates additional supply of credit into the system. In addition, we think about the Africa Free Trade Agreement and the fact that governments are reducing tariffs to stimulate regional growth, I think is very important because it goes to that concept I referenced earlier of Africa being able to fund Africa's growth. And the African Free Trade Agreement goes a long way to developing this theme. So what I've described today are 5 key factors which I think are going to accelerate Africa's recovery over the next couple of years. I'm very positive. I think we have the building blocks to do it. We have strong financial institutions, and we have a government that looks like governments across the continent that are looking really to assist in driving this agenda. So thanks very much for your time today.